I have a little talk prepared. So excuse me for reading some of it. I was here a little under a year ago at 8035 Festival with a tour that I did at St. Vincent, and it's not usual that we have days off, but it was a 4th of July weekend, and we had 2 days off, and we travel with bicycles, so I explored the Des for a couple of days, and I was kind of pleasantly surprised. I didn't expect to see what I saw. Of course, at first I was completely thrilled that there were these great bike paths along the river and around the lake and out to Cumming and all these different places.
Hey, my hometown.
Ride and ride. Could use a few more in town, but okay. But there was other things that I noticed, and I thought, am I imagining this, or is this really what I'm seeing? I sensed that there wasn't in Des Moines. I thought, there doesn't seem to be this huge disparity of income that I'm used to seeing in New York. You're not used to seeing like huge fancy houses or palaces or restaurants or whatever, and then homeless people right next to it living on the street. You don't get, and living in a place like that, I'm complaining about my own town, you feel a little bit like you're kind of a visitor or an intruder in a rich person's playground. At least that's the way Manhattan is starting to feel. And I felt like Des Moines didn't go down that road. I saw people of different races and different backgrounds. It was 4th of July weekend after all, out kind of picnicking and hanging out together, there was a ball game. There was a lot of people going to the ball game that weekend. Rather than being isolated in their own communities, everybody seemed to be out. Of course, it was 4th of July weekend, so I was getting a little bit of a false impression. I rode around through a lot of neighborhoods. I got a sense that there was still a middle class in Des Moines. And a lot of the country, that's been gutted. And I felt like, okay, there's a middle class here and they are staying here. So not going anywhere else, which helps the whole city feel more alive and vital and everything like that. It's not just financial. There's, of course, people staying means there's a tax base and that the city can actually do things. But it also means that for everybody, for the kids coming up and for the older folks, there's a whole sense of life. And I sensed that there was the beginning of, I saw evidence of galleries and stores and boutiques and restaurants and all kinds of things where I thought, oh, people are starting to kind of thinking about the idea of hanging out and maybe even living downtown, which in a lot of cities, downtown empties out at night and nobody ever goes there. And I thought, that to me, that's great too, because it means there's a place where people come together. I grew up in Baltimore, which is sadly kind of the opposite. It's a place which is divided down the middle, and on one side it's kind of desolation and boarded up buildings and empty lots, and there are some very nice kind of well-to-do neighborhoods, and there's a wonderful art school that I went to for a while. But I didn't get that here either, or maybe I just didn't ride through that neighborhood, but I felt like there isn't that huge kind of sense of huge parts of the city that are just kind of desolation, boarded up buildings and offices and everything, and I thought, okay, that didn't happen here either. So I thought to myself, wow, people here are making a life for themselves, a really decent life for themselves, and it could be a good place for people to make a life, raise kids, all those kind of cliches. And I thought, gee, maybe we New Yorkers have to get over ourselves a little bit and kind of reevaluate what's going on elsewhere and what a kind of a quality of life could be, because we're kind of used to like this aggressive striving, and we have to realize that we don't have a monopoly on what it takes to have a good life. Okay, so that's what I saw. I wrote a blog post, or a number of blog posts about it, and I did some research. I talked to a historian in Chicago, and because I said, well, how did this happen? Why is Des Moines like this? Why is this place seem to be doing really well, and say St. Louis is, sorry, not doing as well. Okay, so the blog post went out, and somehow Zach got in touch with me and said, well, yes, I had the same impression. I moved here, and I used to live in Brooklyn. I used to have a theater company and work there, and I decided that it was just the struggle living in Brooklyn, where the rents are now like, or not the rents, to buy an apartment is now like $2 million. And we all realize that no struggling artist or theater person or performer can afford that. So Zach said, I'm thinking of doing something out here, and this is the beginning of it. I have the restaurant and some other things going on. So we emailed back and forth, and this was all a really fascinating subject for me. I'm really fascinated by why does one city work, and why does another city not work? Why does this musical scene, a theater scene, or artistic scene, or whatever, emerge in one city and not somewhere else? I noticed many years ago that in New York, that the guy who opened CBGB's, Hilly Crystal, he opened this place. It was a dive bar on the Bowery. There weren't that many bands playing around, and he opened a place, and suddenly there were 1 million bands. And you wonder, where did they all come from? Were they all just like hiding behind? No, they were. I mean, it is the kind of thing of, if you open it, if you make a place for people to do their creative work, they will appear out of the woodwork, and they will start making stuff. Which is, what this place is about. So I thought, okay, that's, to me, it's not like people are, what it also means is, when something like that happens here, it means that people don't have to leave. They don't feel like, I want to be a songwriter, I want to do this, I want to do that, I have to leave Des Moines. Maybe not. Zach and I were talking last night, and to be realistic, it takes more than one place like this. It takes, to keep a whole kind of artistic community afloat, it takes other places in other towns. There has to be a kind of network and a circuit. I remember years ago that Talking Heads, we could play in Boston, but we couldn't get a gig in New Jersey, which was, 20 minutes away. But eventually we could get a network where we could drive to different places. We'd play in a pizza parlor or whatever, and we'd play, and you could kind of start to make a living. And so I thought, okay, there's towns around here, there's towns that are maybe a day's drive away, and the various creative people can do that, and that helps keep them afloat, because they're not going to be able to make a total living just playing here. This has to be a stepping stone to other places in other towns. Where am I going here? Oh yeah. I read recently an article about a Brazilian architect whose reputation is being kind of resurrected recently. Her name is Lina Bobardi, and she, in 1982, she renovated or retrofitted an old factory in Sao Paulo and called it the Pompeii Factory Leisure Center. And it's like this, it's a multi-use facility. It has a theater, a cafe. It's in Brazil, so they have a swimming pool. The article had a quote from, here's a quote from the article. It said, "This building offers a concrete example of Bobardi's main pursuits to show that her building and what it was intended to do and what it does do It shows that culture is a fact of everyday reality. It's not a special event that happens once in a while. It's not the domain of the elite. And it can even be viewed as an antidote to consumer society. That we don't have to feel like we only receive stuff. We can make stuff too. She decided to call it a leisure center rather than a cultural center, which I thought, oh, that's kind of key. A cultural center, people might feel is kind of pretentious or has some special meaning to it, but calling it a leisure center, it implies that you're going to have fun. And I thought, oh, okay, the same thing's going on here. It's called a social club. It implies that, well, there's a lot going on, but a lot of it is social, and you're going to run into other people. Okay, I came here on my way. I had a show in LA and on the West Coast, and I'm heading back to New York. And I stopped here because I think what's happening here is hugely encouraging. And I want to give it a big thumbs up, and I hope this initiative really succeeds. This kind of thing makes all sorts of things possible. Performances and exhibitions and all of that. It gives a venue for all the creative folks around here. And it is what it says. It's also a social club. It's a place where people meet and interact with other people, where people who would never meet and apparently have no interests in common come into contact with one another. Another thing that Zach and I talked about, we asked ourselves, can some creative explosion happen here? Can it happen? What makes it happen? It's hard to say. There's no guarantees, but it is possible. And it's certainly not going to happen unless there are places like this. And sad for me to say, it's not going to happen in Manhattan anymore. Which means it's up to you guys. Okay, to wrap it up, I just want to say congratulations, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens here in the near future. Thanks a lot, it's good to be back.
Can we get a little louder for David Byrne, please? There we go. David's throwing out the ribbon, guys. Hey, there's a ribbon coming your way. Those of you in the front, pass it, pass it, pass it, pass it all the way back. Let's get as many people touching this thing as possible. We've got some people coming up on the stage right now, and